Good Sunday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for October the 15th. Today we are reading together here in First Chronicles chapters 13 and 14, which is going to continue to progress us through the chronicler's rendition of the reign of David. Again, it is not as detailed as what we had back in the Samuels and the Kings, but it is written, again, not just to detail history, but to really give a theological purpose behind the writing. And thinking this one right here, especially as we compare chapters 13 and 14, we're going to see the very distinct difference of what happens whenever David and the people depend on God and inquire of God, and what happens whenever they don't. We're going to begin with the negative first here in First Chronicles chapter 13. So let me get the text up on the screen, and we'll read along together here, beginning in First Chronicles chapter 13 and verse number 1. First Chronicles chapter 13, verse number 1, David consulted with all his leaders, the commanders of hundreds and of thousands. Then he said to the whole assembly of Israel, "If it seems good to you, and if this is from Yahweh our God, let's spread out and send the message to the rest of our relatives in all the districts of Israel, including the priests and Levites in their cities with pasture lands, that they should gather together with us. Then let's bring back the ark of God, for we did not inquire of him in Saul's day." Since the proposal seemed right to all the people, the whole assembly agreed to do it. So David assembled all Israel from Shihor of Egypt to the entrance of Hamath, to bring the ark of God from Kiriath Jearim. David and all Israel went to Baalah, that is Kiriath Jearim, that belongs to Judah, to take it from there, the ark of God, which bears the name of Yahweh, who is enthroned between the cherubim. At Abinadab's house, they set the ark of God on a new cart. Uzzah and Ahio were guiding the cart. David and all Israel were dancing with all their might before God, with songs and with lyres, harps, tambourines, cymbals, and trumpets. When they came to Chidon's threshing floor, Uzzah reached out to hold the ark because the oxen had stumbled. Then Yahweh's anger burned against Uzzah, and he struck him dead because he had reached out to the ark. So he died there in the presence of God. David was angry because of Yahweh's outburst against Uzzah, so he named that place Outburst against Uzzah, as it is still named today. David feared God that day and said, "How can I ever bring the ark of God to me?" So David did not bring the ark of God home to the city of David. Instead, he diverted it to the house of Obed-Edom of Gath. The ark of God remained with Obed-Edom's family in his house for 3 months, and Yahweh blessed his family and all that he had. Chapter 14 of First Chronicles, King Hiram of Tyre sent envoys to David, along with cedar logs, stonemasons, and carpenters, to build a palace for him. Then David knew that Yahweh had established him as king over Israel, and that his kingdom had been exalted for the sake of his people Israel. David took more wives in Jerusalem, and he became the father of more sons and daughters. These are the names of the children born to him in Jerusalem: Shammua, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Eliphet, Nogah, Nepheg, Japhia, Elishama, Beeliada, and Eliphelet. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over all Israel, they went out in search of David. And when David heard of this, he went out to face them. Now the Philistines had come and raided in Rephaim Valley. So David inquired of God, "Should I attack the Philistines? Will you hand them over to me?" Yahweh replied, "Attack, and I will hand them over to you." So the Israelites went up to Baal Perazim, and David defeated the Philistines there. Then David said, "Like a bursting flood, God has caused me to burst out against my enemies." Therefore, they named that place Yahweh Burst Out. The Philistines abandoned their idols there, and David ordered that they be burned in the fire. Once again, the Philistines raided in the valley. So David again inquired of God, and God answered him, "Do not pursue them directly. Circle around them and attack them opposite the balsam trees. When you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the balsam trees, then go out to battle. for God will have gone out ahead of you to strike down the army of the Philistines. So David did as God commanded him, and they struck down the Philistine army from Gibeon to Gazer. Then David's fame spread throughout the lands, and Yahweh caused all the nations to be terrified of him. And that is the reading of First Chronicles chapters 13 and 14. 13 and 14. Let me look at something real fast here. See if I could find, let's see. Okay. All right. So looking at this text here in First Chronicles 13 and 14, again, we see some of the good and also some of the bad whenever it comes to David. In the first story here in chapter 13, we see that David consults with all the leaders, with the whole assembly of Israel, and he recognizes that it is good for them. It is good for them to bring the ark of Yahweh back to where they are, back to the city of David, because they recognize that in Saul's day, they had not inquired of Yahweh as they should have. So this desire, I think, is a good desire. What they're recognizing here is a good recognition. However, they state about the need to inquire of God, and yet it doesn't seem as if they actually inquire of God, which is strange to me because it says, verse 2, if it seems good to you, and if this is from Yahweh our God, let's do this. But once you get down to verse number 4, we see that this proposal seemed right to all the people. The whole assembly agreed to do it. It doesn't seem, and I could be missing something, but it does not seem as if there actually was an inquiry to God to see whether or not they should do this. And on top of that, they don't go about carrying the ark to the city of David in the correct way. We know that the law stipulated that it was the Levites who were to take poles and put the poles through the rings on the ark and lift it up and carry it wherever it was to go. Not to do as they do here, where there is this cart that they put it on that eventually hits some kind of hole, I guess, or something like that in the road. The cart stumbles, the oxen stumbles, and Uzzah reaches up to stay the ark, and he ends up dying because he has touched that which is holy. It's a disaster, really. Again, good intentions are found here. The people's hearts seem to really be in what they do here in moving the ark. I mean, you have everybody here, they're dancing with songs and with lyres, harps, tambourines, cymbals, trumpets. They're all doing this the idea of what's going on here is a good thing. To be in Yahweh's presence is a good thing. To have Yahweh's presence with them in the city of David is a good thing. Yet they did not go about it the right way by doing it according to Yahweh's will. Number one, with the stipulations within the law of how to transport the ark. And then number two, it doesn't seem like they actually inquire of God. It doesn't seem like David does that. Because there was this punishment at the cost of Uzzah's life. David was angry. He didn't feel as if he can even get the ark, so he ends up leaving it at this man's house. It's interesting, it says that David feared God. He feared God. That's not exactly a bad thing. We should fear God. And here, that fear seems to be rooted in the fact that he sees the specificity with which God demands that things be done according to the ways he has stipulated that they be done. So in this first chapter, we see a failure in not inquiring of God fully to see what need to be done and to not respect what God actually had already previously revealed. But now once we get in chapter 14, we see that the first couple of verses just show us how God, though, continues to bless David. Even though he makes mistakes, he, again, still has a heart after him. And whenever David faces the Philistines, this time he makes sure to inquire of God. So David inquired of God, verse number 10, should I attack the Philistines? And here's part of the reason it seems that he inquires of God. It's because he recognizes that God's the one who can hand them, his enemies, over to him, the king of Israel. So he replies, Yahweh replies to David, yes, I will hand them over to you. I will hand them over to you. So he goes up with Israel. The text tells us they defeat the Philistines just as Yahweh said they would. It was like a bursting flood against the Philistines. They just completely overwhelmed them and attacked them so much that they even abandoned their idols. And we read in verse number 12 that David ordered that the idols be burned with fire. Well, the Philistines gave it another try, raided against them again. And what does David do? Once again, David inquires of Yahweh again. Yet notice that Yahweh doesn't say to pursue them this time. This reminds me a lot of the story of Moses with water from the rock. If I remember correctly, he is told first to speak to the rock, the first instance where the people needed water and water came from it. The second time, he is told to, oh, no, excuse me. I think the first time he's told to strike the rock, and he does that and water comes out. The second time he's told to speak to the rock. He doesn't, though, and he strikes it instead, and Moses himself suffers punishment for this disobedience. Here, two instances, the same request, and God gives a second command the second time, which is to wait until you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the balsam trees, which people interpret that in a number of different ways. But once you hear that, then you can go down. Then you can go out to battle, for God will have gone ahead of you to strike down the army of the Philistines. Many people think that is the symbol of angelic armies that might have been up in the trees. I can't even recall what I mentioned in the previous text where this was mentioned, this particular story. Let's see. It was in Second Samuel 6, I believe it was. Let me double check that real fast. 2 Samuel chapter 6. 2 Samuel chapter 6. Let's see. Oh, 2 Samuel chapter 6. See, 2 Samuel chapter 6 actually talks about the moving of the ark and the let's see. I knew I should have written this down. I forgot to do that. Wherever this was, again, not exactly sure. Nobody's exactly sure what the interpretation of the rustling in the tops of the trees is. Whatever it was, that simply would be the signal that now you can go and fight. David obeyed that. Again, the difference here between these two chapters and the events of these chapters is there was a direct inquiry of God. And whenever God gave a command, through this inquiry, whenever David did what he needed to do and searched out God's will, and God gave his will, and David obeyed, then good things happened. And even whenever it's a similar question, and God gave a different answer, David was sure to obey. Then he didn't just say, well, it worked the first time, so I'm going to do it the second time the exact same way. No, he was cautious and make sure to listen fully to what Yahweh was telling him to do. David did as God commanded him. They struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gazer. His fame spread throughout the lands. And notice that God caused the nations to be terrified of him. But notice again, who is it? It's God. God is at the root of all of this success. Really, he was at the root of the failure too, meaning that he gave the punishment for the failure in chapter 13. But now roles are reversed. Now we see at the beginning of chapter 14 that even the nations are blessing Israel by God's grace. And now God has given victory to Israel over their enemies by God's grace. Guess what? It all gets back to God's grace. Any success we have, any blessings that we have, anything positive that we experience is a blessing from God, is by his grace, and we must recognize that and give thanks. And on the front end, we need to seek Yahweh's will. We need to know his will for us in our lives. Don't just go around doing whatever we think is best. Consult his word. See if there are direct instructions into that. See what principles might guide us in the decision-making process. And if we do that, if we truly trust him and follow whatever direction he might lead us through his word, we can have confidence that we are doing the right thing, that we will continue to experience his blessings. Certainly good lessons for us to consider here, comparing chapters 13 and 14 here at First Chronicles. If you have any questions about these texts, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. And looking forward to being with everybody here in just a little bit as we gather for our Bible studies and our worship assembly. In the worship assembly, we will be continuing our study through the Gospel of Mark. We'll be in chapter 7, looking at Jesus's issues with the traditions of the Pharisees, the elders of Israel. Have a really good study on hand. I'm really looking forward to going through that with you. Again, hope you have a great rest of your Sunday, everyone. May God bless you in all that you do, and hope that you'll join me again tomorrow as we read together in chapters 15 and 16, which come with a beautiful psalm of David for thanksgiving toward God for all the goodness he has shown him in his life. Looking forward to reading that with you then. Take care. God bless.